Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Reed Romine, a second-year daytime MBA at Fuqua, and today I have the unique honor and privilege of introducing Chip Bergh, the president and CEO of Levi Strauss & Co. After graduating from Lafayette College, Chip served for 4 years as a U.S. Army officer, followed by a 28-year career at Procter & Gamble. During his time at P&G, Chip's leadership was vital to the success of many iconic brands, including the creation of Swiffer and the turnaround of Old Spice. Chip also led the integration of Gillette in 2005 and ran that division for over 6 years. Chip joined Levi Strauss as CEO in 2011. Since then, Levi's has experienced significant growth and a financial turnaround. Some of Levi's biggest successes under Chip's leadership include revamping their women's denim line, expanding their direct-to-consumer sales via online and company-owned retail stores, acquiring the naming rights to the San Francisco 49ers football stadium, and just last year, returning Levi's to the public market. As CEO, Chip has also served as a leader in raising awareness for corporate sustainability, gun safety, and immigration reform. Last spring, Fortune magazine recognized Chip as one of the world's greatest leaders. We're extremely fortunate to have Chip here with us today. Please join me in extending a warm Fuqua welcome to Chip Bergh.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Well, it's wonderful to have you here. So I'm going to jump in and I'm going to start with a little bit of history here, and then we'll work up to the stint at Levi Strauss. So it was mentioned that you have a military background, and that, as I understand it, you put yourself through college through the ROTC program, and then entered into the military for 4 years. So as you think about who you are today, what did you bring from that experience in the military that you think has helped you as a leader in all the things that you've done subsequently in your career?
Yeah, that's a great question. This morning I had the privilege of meeting Coach K, and I was on his podcast, and he also has a military background. He went to West Point. I like to say I went to a real school. But then he served 5 years, I served 4 years in the Army, and we were talking before the podcast just about how impactful that military career was. And I have said many, many times, I don't think I would be where I am today if I hadn't served our country for 4 years. Part of it is this notion of service and serving your country, and I served during the Cold War. It was 1979 to 1983. Most of that time I lived in West Germany because the wall was still up and there was still an East Germany, and my unit actually patrolled the border twice a year. But it formed who I am as a leader, and many of the leadership characteristics and traits that I still have today came from my days in the military. A lot about servant leadership, putting your people before you, never asking people to do something that you yourself wouldn't do yourself. The whole notion of character and honor is just such an important part of who I am and how I lead. I am humble. I don't believe I'm the smartest light bulb in the room. I know I'm not the smartest light room in.
Is it okay to claim that you're humble?
Okay, fair, fair. But what you see is what you get with me, and that's part of how I lead. So it had a very significant impact, and I also don't think I would have wound up at P&G if I hadn't spent 4 years in the military. So it's a big part of who I am. I have 2 older boys, and when both of them went to college, I tried to convince them to enroll in ROTC. They would have nothing to do with it. But that's okay. They would have nothing to do with wearing Levi's back then either. And we can talk about that later.
Okay. So you mentioned then you have the opportunity to go to P&G. And as you look at P&G over the years, it's been a breeding ground for many great leaders who've gone on to do wonderful things. And so as you think about your experience at P&G, what do you bring from that experience that you think has really helped you in your current stint with Levi Strauss?
Yeah, I like to say when you get to be our age, because we're both about the same age, kind of early 60s, when you get to be our age and you look back on your career, I am just an aggregation of all the different experiences that I've had. I've worked on big brands, small brands, local brands, global brands, growing brands, declining brands, profitable brands, unprofitable brands, number one brands, number three brands. I mean, I've really worked on a huge range of different types of brands, and those different experiences have made me kind of who I am today. I started in brand management, which got renamed marketing, which I think was a mistake, but I started in brand management and worked my way up through the ranks into general management. I still remember, I joined from the military. Most of my peer group, most of the people in my class, if you will, were graduates from great business schools. I did not go to business school. My business school was P&G, and I was entering from the Army. And so it was very, very intimidating. And I still remember the day I started thinking to myself, if I can just make it to brand manager, I'm going to be okay. And that's like typically about 4 years. I made it to brand manager in 3.5 years. But I had a great career. And as a marketer, as a brand guy, which is what I really am, I am a brand guy. I'm a marketer at heart. I learned all about the importance of really just studying the consumer and understanding consumer behavior and how to motivate and persuade a consumer to want to buy your brand. And that has been a big part of what I've done through my career, and it was something that gave me confidence as I went into this new job that I figured if we could fix the Levi's brand, we could fix the company. But I learned about being disciplined, financial discipline, how to run a business in a financially disciplined way, how to take calculated risks, how to build a team. Was such an important thing that I learned. And Procter was such a magnet for great talent back in the day, especially when I was a brand manager, a marketing director, bringing in this great talent every single year and trying to coach and guide and develop people. And I think that's probably one of the things that has stayed with me more than anything is at the end of the day, the higher you go in an organization, the less real work you do. My job is about capital allocation and people allocation, resource allocation at this point, and about inspiring and coaching and motivating an organization. And that was a big thing that I learned at P&G too.
And the biggest thing you felt like you had to change as you shifted from P&G to Levi's?
Well, nothing prepares you to be a CEO than being a CEO. I thought I was ready, and I thought I would have it all figured out on day one, and I've made mistakes along the way, and you learn as you go. But the track record of people going from packaged goods into apparel at the CEO level is really bad, actually. It's pretty poor. I think the batting average is close to 0. So I knew that I had to go into it with an appreciation and understanding that there was a lot that I was going to have to learn. Actually, the apparel business is more like selling fruit than it is packaged goods, because every season, half of our product line goes away and a new half comes in. It ages because of fashion and fashion trends. And so I had to learn about the complexity of the business. The apparel business is way more complex than the Gillette business or any of the packaged goods products that I had in my career background. But one thing was the same, and that was the consumer. And this notion of being consumer obsessed and really trying to understand the consumer and what will motivate him or her to buy your brand, I figured if we could unlock that, we could unlock the path to success on Levi's. But I knew going into the job that the odds were pretty much stacked against me, and I was determined to demonstrate that with the right kind of nose and sniffing the right direction that we could get this business turned around.
Okay, so that's a good segue to the reality that you faced when you stepped in the door, which was a business in decline, which in some ways was a tragedy because the Levi's brand, maybe people in this room don't know it. You may be part of the lost generation. In fact, could I just see how many of you own a pair of Levi's jeans? Oh, all right.
Awesome.
Okay. We're off to a good
Just made
start
my
here.
day.
Yeah.
That was like an 80% market share, I think.
That is excellent. So you should understand then that the Levi's brand is truly one of the most iconic brands in American history. And so, but you entered in when the brand was in disrepair. And so I'm curious, what do you think the brand stood for at the moment you took over? And what do you think it stands for now, given a history where it stood for things like freedom, independence, sometimes rebellion?
Right.
So what is the brand?
So I will come back to that, but I want to back up one step and talk a little bit about why I decided to join, because the fact that the business was in decline and a bit of a mess was part of the reason that I was very attracted to it. So 28 years at P&G, I was running the Gillette business, which is P&G's second biggest, most profitable business. We acquired Gillette in 2005. I was the Procter guy, dropped in to do it. $57 billion acquisition, still today the largest acquisition in packaged goods. And when I got the call for this opportunity at Levi's, I started doing my homework, and Levi's peaked in the mid-90s, in 1996, at $7.1 billion in sales. In 1996, we were bigger than Nike. They were $6.5 billion. And we went from $7.1 billion in sales to $4.1 billion in sales in 5 years. Wrong direction, right? And massive shareholder value destruction. And then for the next decade, it just kind of bumped along. So I was not quite mid-50s, early 50s at the time, and I was pretty sure I wasn't going to be CEO at P&G because Bob McDonald was the CEO. He's 4 years older than me. If he had a good run, I'd be too old to be the next CEO. So when I started doing the homework on Levi's, this looked like such an opportunity. When you get to your 50s, you start thinking about, what's my legacy going to be? What's the impact? What's the story of my career and of my life? And I grew up in Levi's, and I like to say everybody has a Levi's story. I grew up outside of New York City. I remember asking my mom before I started 7th grade to drive me about 3 towns over so that I could buy a pair of Levi's for 7th grade, because I wasn't going to be that kid not showing up in 7th grade without wearing a pair of Levi's. And when I left for college, I brought 3 pairs of jeans with me. They were all Levi's and 2 pairs of corduroys. That's it. And I like to say, I missed Woodstock. I don't know about you. Did you miss Woodstock? I missed Woodstock. I was a little bit too young for Woodstock, but we like to say, if you were at Woodstock, you were wearing Levi's unless you were naked. And so when the Berlin Wall came down, it was Levi's. And so as I thought about, and then I started talking to friends, and hey, do you wear Levi's? Like my friends would say, God, I grew up in Levi's. I remember your first date, first job, I wore my Levi's. And then I'd ask, when was the last time you bought a pair of Levi's? And you get this blank stare, and geez, I don't know, it's been maybe 20 years or something. So, and I also have 2 boys that are men, really. They're 36 and 32 now, but back then they were kind of college age and just out of college. And they never owned a pair of Levi's when they were teenagers. It was not even in their consideration set. They wore Gap, American Eagle, 7 for All Mankind, but never wore a pair of Levi's. So it was pretty clear to me that here was one of America's greatest brands, one of the most iconic brands arguably in the world, that had just completely lost its way. And that is what attracted me, the opportunity to leave a legacy, to turn around this amazing icon, make that brand great, and turn the company around. And Levi's was at the time and still is today about 85% of the company's business. So if we could get Levi's back on track, the company would turn around. And that fundamentally is what we did. And it was all about really understanding how to put the brand back at the center of culture. This brand, so I'll tell you my Levi story. Aside from my mom taking me a couple towns over, when I was in the Army, 21 years old, very first vacation, military leave that I ever took, I went on a Uriel Pass trip through the Nordics. So Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Finland, and staying in youth hostels and camping. And how many of you have done that before? You know, the way you do that, you got the backpack, you get to the youth hostel to wash your clothes, you hop in the shower with bar soap, wash yourself down, rinse everything out, hang it up to dry. So I went into this youth hostel bathroom, took the wallet out of my pants, put it on the windowsill, hopped in the shower, washed myself down, rinsed the jeans out, hung the jeans up, the t-shirt up, and went to bed. And I woke up in the morning and I was like, I left my wallet in the bathroom. I ran into the bathroom. The wallet was there, the Levi's were gone. Absolute true story. True story. That is the kind of brand that this brand was back in the 1980s. And so what we've managed to do over the last 5 or 6 years is make the brand like that again. Not an easy thing to do. I was telling you earlier, when I joined the company, our average male consumer in the US was 47 years old. They were old guys like us. No young people were wearing Levi's. And so part of the trick has been to attract the young consumer without losing old guys like us. And we've managed to do that. And that is a very hard thing to do from a marketing standpoint. I also did it on Old Spice too. That's a separate story. But we've managed to do it by putting the brand back at the center of culture. And some of the things, you know, Levi's Stadium is part of that. Our advertising campaign, which is all about Live in Levi's, which really plays to this idea that you wear other jeans or you might own other jeans, but you live in Levi's, that there are stories in your Levi's from your life. And that basically has been the idea. And then we've just done, the team has done an amazing job activating around that.
Yeah. So when you talk about the team, one of the things that you discovered when you came into the job was that maybe the team wasn't up to the task, the team at hand.
Yep.
And as I understand it, that of your 11 direct reports, after 18 months, you only had two of those direct reports, and the other people had moved on. This is a challenge as you have to revitalize a business where the people aren't always up to that task. So how do you tackle that kind of change? I mean, what allows you to move forward in terms of your responsibility to this iconic company relative to your responsibility to these people that are working for you?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. When I joined, I expected or knew that I was probably going to have to leave let a couple of people go. You know, the old saying, the team that got us here is probably not going to be the team that gets us there. And, you know, if you want to change the culture, the fastest way to change the culture is to change the people. And when I came in, it was clear a couple people needed to go, and I dealt with that pretty quickly. And then some people self-selected out. I mean, I intentionally raised the bar. I set very high expectations. I'm a pretty fair boss, I think. You can ask Kelly. But I'm also, I set expectations and I'm pretty demanding. And I had a huge sense of urgency that we needed to get on with this task of fixing the company and getting the company back in shape. And I was actually really blessed. I was able to build a team with people. Some of the folks on my team have deep apparel experience. Some came from outside of apparel. We really had a good blend of different experiences, people who had a lot of experience globally as well. And the team kind of gelled and came together. And at the end of the day, it's really the team that has delivered the results. But Two of them have left recently, both for CEO jobs, and I think that's a huge thing. So one left about a little bit more than a year ago, and he's CEO of Gibson Guitars, and the other one is leaving kind of right now as we speak, and he's going back to South Africa, which is where he's from. He hasn't lived in South Africa in more than 20 years. He's lived all over the world, and he's been with us for about 7 years. He's going back to be CEO of Woolworths, which is not the Woolworths here in the US, it's Woolworths in South Africa. It's the largest retail chain in South Africa. So it's actually, it's kind of neat to see some folks on my team move on to bigger and better responsibilities.
So in that transition, what was the hardest part about building trust with the team that you were developing and creating the sense of common purpose and urgency around the task at hand? And what did you do to make that happen?
Yeah, it wasn't really linear. There were parallel streams of work going on those first 9 months or 6 to 9 months. So one was on the people front, one was on the strategy, and one was kind of, well, to get to the strategy, diagnosing what are our real issues. And so on the people front, I dealt with the people that clearly weren't going to be players long-term quickly and early on, and brought new people in. Other people had a little bit more runway to prove themselves or else. And then on diagnosing, we needed to get a strategy in place. One of the first things I did when I got there was I sent 6 questions out to the top 60 leaders in the company and asked them, what 3 things do you think must change? What 3 things do we have to keep? What's the one thing you hope I will do? What's the one thing you're afraid I might do? What advice do you have for me? And I don't remember the 6th one, but I sent it out to the top 60 people in the company, and then I sat down with each one of them for an hour, and I thought it would take a while before the picture would be clear, but the feedback was, first of all, I don't think anybody had ever asked them the question. But then secondly, just the opportunity for them to share with me directly what they thought was wrong with the company and where they thought we had the biggest opportunities was just this, it opened them up. And I thought it was going to take 40 or 50 of these interviews for a picture to be clear. It was clear after about 12 interviews what was core for us, what needed to change, and how to get on with it quickly. So that was a piece of it. And then we did a lot of just breaking the company apart analytically, trying to understand, where do we make money? Where are we burning money? Where do we have high shares? Where do we have low shares? Where are we growing? Where are we declining? On and on. Just kept slicing and dicing the business to understand where we had opportunities. And out of those pieces of work came our strategy, which we rolled out about 9 months after I got there, and we're still executing against the same key strategic choices that we put in place 8 years ago.
So I'm going to shift to a conversation more about values and some of the things that you've done to live up to the values that you have, the values that the company has. But I'm curious about how you pick the things that you choose to take a public stand on. So for example, you led an effort to try to bring the CEO community together to send a message on the need for gun safety when we weren't seeing any kind of legislative action on this front. And so you could understand if the CEO of Dick's, who was involved, was in this fight because it's his business, or the CEO of Walmart because it's their business. But what does gun safety have to do with Levi Strauss? Why did you pick that area to make a difference?
So the first thing I would say is it is one of the most important jobs of the office of CEO at Levi Strauss. This is not about me. It is about the role of the CEO at this company. We've been around for 167 years just about, and we have a long history of giving back and making a difference in society. The very first year that Levi Strauss, the man himself, made money, he donated a percentage of his profits to a local orphanage. And without boring you all in an entire history lesson, but when we had factories here in the South and Southeast, We desegregated our factories 10 years before it was the law of the land. We were one of the very first companies to offer healthcare benefits to same-sex partners back in the late 80s. We were very early, the AIDS epidemic started in San Francisco. We're based in San Francisco. When that epidemic started, the CEO stood in the lobby handing out pamphlets to our employees about the AIDS epidemic, and then we boosted our health care benefits for anyone who was diagnosed with AIDS. We pulled funding from the Boy Scouts when they banned gay troop leaders back in the 90s, and got over 100,000 letters and emails saying, "I'm never buying Levi's again," and the company did not waver. So it is part of who we are, and the values of the company is part of what attracted me to the company. They resonate with me. They're aligned with my personal values. Our headquarters is in one of the toughest labor markets in the country, if not the world, in San Francisco. If you're in HR, finance, marketing, public relations, communications, I could go down every functional list, IT. If you're in one of those functions, your skill set's fungible with all of Silicon Valley. And unless you're a designer or maybe a merchant where your skills are very, very apparel specific, you can go anywhere. And it's a buyer's market, if you will. And so part of what allows us to attract and retain great talent is the values of our company. So it is who we are. So we have, over the last couple of years, we've been very vocal about immigration and immigration rights. Levi Strauss was an immigrant himself. This country has benefited from immigration for centuries, and banning or making it difficult for people to immigrate to this country is going to result in an economic impact to the country and will make us ultimately uncompetitive over time. And so we believe very, very strongly in it. We need it from a labor standpoint. And so we took a position on that literally the week after Trump became president, when he put the immigration ban in place. We've signed amicus briefs. We've been very, very active there. Gun violence prevention, we got involved in that in part because it is one of the biggest social issues of our day, and it really impacts young people. I have my grown boys, but I also have an 11-year-old daughter who's in 5th grade, and she goes to school in San Francisco. She practices lockdown drills more than they practice earthquake drills. For 5th grade parents' night, she had to write something to leave to her parents on her desk, and it was a template kind of format that they had to follow, but she had to talk about the 3 things that she worries about most. Number 1, climate change. Number 2, being shot and killed at school and not being able to say goodbye to her parents. Number 3, the Earth being hit by an asteroid. I don't know where that one came from. But it does go to show you, and if you talk to any Gen Zers, and there might be some even in the room, you talk to any Gen Zers, they believe my generation, our generation, has left them with a lot of problems. And whether it's climate change, sustainability, the global warming, or gun violence here in this country. And I feel that we have an obligation to do something about it. And Congress has been deadlocked on this issue. The vast majority of Americans believe that there should be stricter laws in place to mitigate or reduce the risk of mass violence. And so we sent a letter to the House of Representatives in January, encouraging them to pass H.R. 8, which was universal background checks. And that passed in a bipartisan way. I mean, it was not a Republican-Democrat thing. It had a vast, overwhelming amount of support. Went over to the Senate, and the Senate version of that bill was sitting on Mitch McConnell's desk coming back from the break after the summer, and it's still, unfortunately, sitting there. But we penned a letter to Senator McConnell and everybody else in the Senate saying, you've got to pass this legislation. We went from 4 signatures in the letter in January to 140 signatures in the letter in September. We actually kept the letter alive online and had over 240 signatures. So we were at the tip of the spear. You know, I stuck my neck out. I had death threats. I had unmarked police in front of my house for a couple of weeks. I stuck my neck out. We stuck our neck out. We don't have a dog in the hunt, but we are an iconic American brand. And we believe when we lend our voice to something, when we lead, others follow. And I really do believe that this is one of the biggest issues of the day in this country. Something needs to be done about it. Congress isn't doing anything about it, so business leaders have to step in and lend their voice to this to make our communities, our schools, our places of worship safe again. And that's really what it's all about.
So in addition to being consistent with the company's values and the tradition of those living up to those values, you've made the business case, which is you're not going to be able to attract the talent unless the people feel like they like to work for your company. Having said that, what about on the customer front? So do you pay a price? You know we have a faculty member here who has a theory that all brands are going to evolve to either be blue brands or red brands. On the employment front, you're operating in a blue state, and so, but are you becoming a blue brand from a consumer point of view?
Well, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal that made that allegation. I like to think we are one of the most democratic brands in the country and in the world. I mean, we have a huge market share here in the U.S., and I don't think it skews left or right, to be honest with you. I've got some data on that, but we want this brand to be accessible. You know, our stand on gun violence is not we're not trying to repeal the Second Amendment. I mean, I served our country. I served in the military. I took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States. I believe in the Constitution, and I believe in the freedoms here in the U.S. So it's not about that. It's about making our communities, our schools, our places of worship, places where people congregate safe again. And actually, after we took this stand, our business continued to grow, globally and here in the U.S. And so there's no evidence of it negatively impacting our business. I do get hate mail, and I get mail from consumers saying, I'm out, I'm not buying your brand ever again. It happens. But we're also getting people coming to the brand for the first time because of our stand. And at the end of the day, I like to say history is going to judge whether this was the right call or the wrong call. I mean, when the company took the stand on the Boy Scouts, you know, like I said, they got 130,000 pieces of mail saying, I'm out, I'm not buying your stuff anymore. We look back on that now with the benefit of history between us and the event and say, that was a no-brainer. You know, look at the Boy Scouts now. They've dropped the word boy. They've embraced gay troop leaders. And it looks like history has proven our position to be right. And I'm willing to be judged by history 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the road. And I think it's going to, again, prove that this stand was the right thing to do.
So it clearly takes courage, given not everyone is going to agree with you, and they may be quite vocal or quite vicious in how they express those views. So you led this effort around trying to get the business community to encourage Congress to take action on gun violence. There were people who chose not to sign. Mm-hmm. And so, for example, allegedly, Mark Zuckerberg really agreed with what was being proposed in the letter, but didn't want to put Facebook more in the spotlight and therefore attract trouble. Is that fair for him to take that position?
Well, I think every CEO and every company has to really assess what's the right thing for their business, their company, and their stakeholders. There were a number of people, including personal friends, CEOs of other companies who I know really well, who decided to opt out of it. And each one of them had their reasons for doing it. And I had to respect their point of view. We also got people weighing in and agreeing to sign the letter who 6 months earlier didn't want to have anything to do with it, and they had turned the corner and had come around on it. So, people who work in highly regulated industries, people who work in businesses that are under the government spotlight right now, I think we're trying to avoid doing anything that would intensify that spotlight, which probably explains Zuckerberg's position if that really was where he was. But I respect them for their decisions, and I know how hard it is to be a CEO, and I know how hard it is to get people on board on taking a contentious issue. I mean, this went through several iterations with our board before we decided to take a stand. I mean, you have to bring everybody along, and it's not something. It was amazing. We did get some CEOs to almost agree on the spot, but others were like, I've got to go back, I've got to work it with my board, and totally get that.
Yeah. So I mentioned to you earlier that a couple of weeks ago, the Edelman Trust Barometer results came out. And for those of you in the audience, the news was not good. According to the Trust Barometer, 56% of the general population believes that business is harmful to society. And so your thesis is that the business community has a responsibility to step up and do even more than perhaps we've done in the past because of the breakdown of institutions and kind of a willingness to try to advance a common good in a very polarized world. So I mentioned that statistic, but then there are two other statistics that I want you to help me understand how these can coexist. 56% people think business is bad. It's a force for bad in the world. But 73% of employees think that their job is a platform to improve the world. And 66% of consumers say that they make choices trying to improve the world we live in.
Right.
So what's the disconnect? I mean, it looks like as if you're an employee, if you're a customer, you're trying to use business as a force to improve the world, but somehow people aren't buying it. Where are we going wrong?
Well, I think business, the Edelman Trust Barometer, which just rolled out 2 weeks ago in Davos, I suspect part of what's underneath it, and I wasn't there, so I haven't seen the data, but I suspect part of what's underneath that is when you look at, just take this country, look at the issues that we're facing in this country, whether it's income disparity, access to quality education, particularly in inner cities. Look at the polarization in this country between liberals and conservatives, and a growing polarization. And a lot of people will say it's companies that have driven this, taken jobs, you've shipped them overseas, you've driven this income disparity. My guess is that's a big part of what's underneath it. I do think, as I said before, that particularly in a world where institutions and governments are pulling away from the responsibilities that they have to the societies, the countries where they are, that there is a huge vacuum that needs to be filled. And I've always believed that companies exist more than just to make a profit, to return money to shareholders. That we are all about the stakeholders that we support, and stakeholders from employees and retirees all the way through to the people, the communities where we live and where we operate. And if we do a really good job at that, we can bridge a lot of these divides. And I would say in our company, a lot of people join Levi's and they stay with Levi's because our values are a big part of who they are. It's very closely aligned to their values, and that's why they're there. Our values are a competitive advantage in a marketplace like San Francisco. The last point about consumers starting to buy brands that closely align with their values, there is definitely a trend in that direction. I mean, I would say 10 years, and I've been doing this for 40 plus years now. 10 years ago, we would talk about sustainability and doing things, you know, that are going to be good for planet Earth, and consumers, they didn't buy it. I mean, not in this country. In some parts of Europe, yes, but not in this country. Today, consumers, they will buy, the line I like to use is they want value and values. They will buy into a brand's values as long as it's a good value. And so who we are as a company and who Levi's is as a brand is very, very important. And I think part of the reason we've won with young consumers is our brand values resonate with the young consumer.
Okay. So I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'm going to turn it over to the audience to allow you all to ask questions. And so the question is the following, which is you've said that on your tombstone, it's likely to read, "You're the guy who says I don't wash my jeans." Mm-hmm. And that, you know, that just went totally viral when you made that statement.
Yes, it did.
So do you feel like
It does.
Is this a challenge that you're trying to come up with something where, you know, you can rewrite that epitaph in some way instead of the guy who didn't wash his jeans?
No. So the backstory on that thing, it happened at a Fortune sustainability conference, and we had actually done a life cycle analysis of a pair of jeans to understand a pair of jeans' carbon imprint in the world. And a big part of it was understanding water consumption. So jeans are made from cotton. Cotton consumes a hell of a lot of water. So a lot of the water is consumed up front growing the cotton. Then the cotton gets spun into yarn and made into fabric, and then eventually made into a pair of jeans. The amount of water that we actually control, that's within our control in the manufacturing of a pair of jeans, is less than 4% of all the water that jean will consume over a period of time. Half of it is consumer habit. And in this country, we have a really bad habit that we wear something, doesn't matter what it is, and we immediately throw it in the wash. And the average wash frequency of a pair of jeans is every 1.2 wearings in the United States. In China, it's about 10. So I made this comment, really, and I went on stage not thinking I was going to make this comment. It just kind of came out of my head. But I was wearing one of my favorite pair of jeans. It's true for this pair of jeans, too, that they had never seen the inside of a washing machine. Now, it doesn't mean that I don't wash them. It just means I don't put them into a washing machine. But the headline was, Levi's CEO doesn't wash his jeans. And literally in the first month, I think we had 80 billion impressions on that quote. And that's why I said it's going on my tombstone. But it also kind of sparked a debate that has always been raging with denim heads. So there might be a denim head or two in this room, people that just really are into denim. They'll pay a premium for great denim. Real denim heads will not put their jeans in a washing machine. They'll hand wash it, they'll spot scrub it, spot clean it, but putting a fabric into a washing machine destroys the fabric over time. And then even worse, God forbid you put it into the dryer. But it's also not good for sustainability reasons. So when my jeans get really gross, I do what I did in the youth hostel. I hop in the shower, I wash them down with a little bit of shampoo or body wash or something and a scrub brush, rinse them out and hang them up to dry. And that is the best way to take care of a pair of jeans.
And no one's stealing them now.
Nobody's stealing them now because I'm doing it in my own bathroom.
Okay, well, thank you for being so thoughtful about what it means to be a leader of consequence and also with a sense of humor. So, questions from the audience? One here.
Hey, Chip, thanks for being here. One tough question and then hopefully one easier one. The first one, you talked about how the company is pretty used to taking stands on all kinds of issues. When you decide that it's time to do that, say on gun violence, how do you engage all the various stakeholders that are necessary, be they the board, members of your C-suite, customers, whoever. And then the second, if you could just comment on Bill's general aesthetic with the tie and the jeans and that whole thing. Just any of your thoughts, really appreciated.
And let me guess, the second question is the hard one. I think he looks great. He's wearing a pair of Levi's. What's wrong with that? The fact that they're his Levi's from 25 years ago, I think is even more cool, right? So that's a true sustainability story.
That it is.
You know, the first question, though, in all seriousness, it was a lot of work to get everybody on board with the position that we wound up taking. And part of the conversation also is, you know, you can't take a stand on everything. So you have to be strategic and really thoughtful about where you're going to kind of put your stake in the ground. And that was a big part of the conversation is, you know, what else might be coming down the road that might be appropriate for us as a company to be weighing in on. But we have multiple repetitions with the board. We have a NomGov corporate social responsibility committee of the board. And we presented to the committee a couple of times. And truth be told, the board actually made the program stronger. So the board did its job. We went in saying this is going to be a one-year program. We're going to financially support a bunch of nonprofit organizations that are empowering youth voices in this issue. And the board basically said, if you're going to be in it, you got to be in it for more than a year. Go in for 4 years, make it $1 million that you're committing to in this, and do it in a thoughtful, strategic way so that we really do make a difference. So they were the biggest stakeholder group, you know, and I know even our own employees, not everybody's on board with this, and I respect that. I really do. And I get asked, we do a town hall, I call them chips and beer. We really serve beer. And we do it kind of late in the afternoon in the middle of the week, and people come in and we fill up a room about this size, and it's open mic, anybody can ask me anything. And you know, part of having an inclusive organization and really valuing in diversity and inclusion is giving people a voice, even people who disagree with that point of view. In liberal, left-leaning San Francisco, we've got employees who own guns, who don't really think that this is the position we should be taking. And I'll listen to them, and I'll respect their point of view. But it is about stakeholder engagement and getting people on board. I talked to a couple of customers, but not everybody, because they don't get to vote on it. But I did talk to a couple of the bigger ones. I talked to Doug McMillan at Walmart, because he obviously sells weapons and stuff, and you know, tragically, you know, they had their incident back in August, and I talked to them right after that too. But and now they're taking action unilaterally on, and they do have a dog in the hunt, right? It's a big part of their business, the #1 ammunition seller and weapon seller in the country, and so. Does that answer your question? Great. Did I dodge the Bill question well enough?
I thought that answer was awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey there, thanks, Chip. I have a question really around the consumer behavior piece. For a while, we've seen consumers push back on brands to try and integrate their values into them. And now I think, particularly in apparel, we're starting to see companies come back and ask the question of how can they influence consumer behavior to really be more sustainable beyond just redesigning their products. So I'm curious to know what you think the biggest tools and opportunities are for brands to be influenced.
So I think this may be one of our biggest opportunities. And in my early days, I used to juxtaposition us versus fast fashion. You know, when I first joined the company, the companies that were winning in apparel were H&M, Zara, Uniqlo, and today, more and more consumers are rejecting them because they realize you buy a cheap t-shirt or a cheap blouse or a cheap something, you wear it 3 times, and then it's going in the landfill. We are the opposite of fast fashion. We are slow fashion. And I think where the consumer is heading is right to our strong point, which is buy fewer items, make them last longer, make them be very, very versatile, and so you can dress them up, dress them down, and you can own them for a long time. One of our top selling items right now is the trucker jacket. I mean, it grew by like almost 50% last year. You can personalize it and customize it. You can put on patches and pins and all kinds of cool stuff. But B, people know that you can wear that thing for the next 25 years and hand it down to your kids or your grandchildren. And your daughter tried to steal yours this morning, you told me. So, and I think that's where apparel is going to head. I think consumers more and more are going to be recycling their clothes, so thrifting is really hot right now with teenagers. They'll go to a thrift store, they'll buy something, and then they'll sell it online on ThredUp or one of the thrift sites. And you're going to see much more of a circular economy in apparel, which is going to be really good for the industry. One of the great things about our brand is nothing legitimizes the power of a brand than being able to charge a premium for an old vintage item. So we sell vintage trucker jackets in some of our stores for $250, $300 when you can buy a brand new one for $99. So what does that say about the strength of the brand? And so a lot of these trends and dynamics really play to our advantage. We're working on sustainable fibers. We've got a line coming out with cottonized hemp that blends hemp in with cotton. Hemp is a much more sustainable fiber. We're doing a lot of cool stuff like that, but at the end of the day, figuring out how to get consumers to buy less, but make that a business opportunity for us is the biggest unlock I think we've got going forward. I mean, I said, my 11-year-old daughter, climate change, global warming is the biggest issue on her mind. Clothes going into the landfill are much worse for climate change than all the chemicals being used in the apparel industry. And so if we can keep clothes out of going into the landfill, by encouraging people to buy fewer product, great product that never goes out of style, that you can wear for a long, long time, you can dress it up, dress it down. That's us. That sets us up to win. Thanks.
Hi, Chip. Thank you for being here today.
Sure. Thank you.
I know that you recently appointed a new artificial intelligence officer.
Yes, I did.
And my question is, what's your vision about analytics at Levi's?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I'm on a mission to digitize this company and embrace kind of the fourth industrial revolution. So it actually started, we now finish our jeans using lasers instead of chemicals and people sanding and scrubbing. So when you buy a pair of jeans, if you buy a pair of jeans that look like it's 3 years old or 5 years old, already broken in and kind of faded and maybe some whisker marks and stuff, that historically was done with chemicals and manual labor, which is why our products are produced in other parts of the world, because the labor here is really expensive. We've now figured out how to do it with lasers and digital disruption. And so we're trying to embrace digital disruption. We have massive quantities of data that we do nothing with. And what really got me onto the AI, machine learning, that as an opportunity was Stitch Fix, which is also in San Francisco. Their business model, anybody use Stitch Fix in the room or know about it? Okay, so basically you fill out a questionnaire that takes like 20 or 25 minutes to fill out, and then they will begin shipping you on a monthly basis a box of clothes. You keep what you like, you return what you don't, and over time, the algorithm gets really smart about you. And their success rate, their hit rate goes up. And they have more data scientists than they have merchants, and they're an apparel company. They have about 100 data scientists. We have way more data than Stitch Fix does. And when I started on this mission, we had 8 data scientists, 8. And they were all working in e-commerce, making our e-commerce site smarter. So we have an enormous opportunity to really leverage the data that we've got to turn it into deep insights about our business that will help us do things like, let me tell you where the opportunities are. Every time you walk into a store, that store has an assortment we can get smarter about what that assortment is based on who's going into that store. So we can actually get down to a very granular level what the consumer profile is that's walking into that store, and then assort that store for that consumer profile. And it might be completely different than a store that's 4 blocks away, because it's a different consumer walking into that store. We used to do a lot of this with gut instinct. The store manager says, well, this is who my consumer is. Now we've got data to be able to do that. That'll increase our sales on a store-by-store basis. We can change our assortments, get tighter assortments, reduce inventory, pricing, promotion, markdown. All these areas are areas where we have data that we've never been able to turn into insights that we could action to drive our business ahead. This industry is way behind other industries when it comes to data analytics, advanced analytics, and AI. This industry historically has been run by the seat of the pants. The loudest voice in the room, the best designer would carry the day. And we've been trying to become much more data-driven, just given my P&G background, but now we're going to put it on steroids with AI. So we hired Katja Walsh, who's a PhD data scientist. She came from Vodafone. We're building up this organization. This year we're going to prove its benefit, and we'll scale it as it goes. But I'm really excited about it, and I think it's going to be a huge unlock for us. And we're way ahead of most apparel companies in this.
Thanks, Chip. My question is related to career management. So you worked in Procter & Gamble for 28 years, whereas some people recommend that you should change jobs to get diverse set of experience. So in your opinion, what should be the guiding principles for managing one's career?
Yes, that's a great question. And I still mentor a lot of people who have worked for me through the years. I was blessed working at P&G. I'll say that straight up front. I thought about leaving a couple of times, but at every opportunity where I felt like I had kind of learned what I was doing and the job that I was in, Procter came along with the next opportunity for me. And I always felt like they were just one step ahead of putting another great assignment in front of me that would keep me growing and keep me challenged and keep me motivated. And so, I thought about leaving Procter once or twice during that 28-year career, but I had amazing opportunities along the way. Like I said, big brands, small brands. I lived overseas. I lived and worked in Singapore. I ran P&G's business in Southeast Asia, which was life-changing. I mean, an incredible experience. And so, again, I am who I am in part because of all the different experiences I had at P&G. Such a big company with so many different brands and so many different countries and regions where we did business that I could get that variety of experiences without ever having to leave the company. And I was blessed because of that. I had a lot of great experiences. So I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. The advice that I give to some of my mentees is take your career in 3 to 5 year increments. Set a long-term goal. I'm very goal-driven, so set a long-term goal. What do you want to be when you grow up, kind of thing. But then take it in smaller 3 to 5 year increments and chart your way to where you want to get to, and recognize that it's probably not going to be a linear, direct. Climbing the ladder is no longer relevant. It's not going to be linear and direct. The world that you're entering when you leave school is going to be very different than the world 25 or 30 years from now. Just like the world today is very different. When I started marketing here in the US, there were 3 television channels. And think of all the media today, right? And most of the relevant media for our target consumer isn't even on television. So the world's going to change dramatically. So be open to your career taking lots of bobs and weaves along the way. But it's all about, are you getting the experiences that are going to make you who you want to be in the future? And because it is about the experiences and the people that you're working with that will make you who you are over time.
so much, Chip. Really appreciate you being here.
Thank you. That was awesome. Thank you all very much.